Suitability podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau, with my co-host, Joseph Haytas, and Michael G. Joseph Haytas is the author of 36 Strategies to Suitability. And today we're on strategy 31. Wow. We're racing through this book. A detailed relapse prevention plan. Don't go to the hearing without it. And that pretty much says it all, but we should probably figure out what it is. Why don't I start with you, Joe, and let us know just what is a relapse prevention plan? We probably want to cover between the three of us what types of risk factors we're going to be wanting to see a relapse prevention plan for, and what you mean by detailed. Take it away.
Okay, well, first of all, what's a relapse? And a relapse is a return to any kind of addictive behavior. And in that context, an addictive behavior is a destructive behavior. And that can be to anything. It doesn't have to, everybody associates it with substance abuse, but not necessarily. I mean, it can be something as, food can be an addiction. Coffee can be an addiction even. Gambling, for instance, criminal thinking, gangs. So any of these things can be an addiction that's destructive. Okay, so you're trying to manage that addiction. So it starts with awareness of it. Obviously, first you have to admit that it's an addiction. And then once you do, this is very detailed, okay? And I'm giving a kind of a simplistic overview now. Once you're aware of it, you need help. And you probably want to first start by going to a group, an NAAA group, and seeing, and you'll see that other people also have addictions as well. But as you go along, as you become self-aware through various means, such as groups, that's one of them, you discover things about yourself, and you come up with things like, why do you have this? And you come up with, why am I stressing? What are the stressors? What are the triggers or the warning signs also of the addiction? And you discover those, and then you come up with coping skills to cope, things you do that either distract you or take away, not necessarily fully, but take away that urge to use again. And coping skills can be any of a number of things that are personal to the person who has the addiction. It can be going out and exercise. It can be praying, meditation, something that distracts the mind away from the urge to use. So you get these warning signs, these stressors, and you put it all in a written plan. That's what a relapse plan is. It's a written plan so you don't return to the addictive behavior. So once you're aware of all these elements of the relapse plan and you write them down, it's a plan, basically. This is the plan part of the of staying away from the addictive, destructive behavior. So this isn't a plan. It's about knowing yourself, knowing what causes you to want to use again, or you want to do the destructive behavior again. And along the way, you pick up a support group, and that's part of your plan. Hopefully you are able to get a sponsor, somebody who's going to perhaps mentor you, for lack of a better term. And also part of a plan includes going to groups, sharing your story with others, and having that support group and being self-aware. And all of that is down in a written plan to keep you from the relapse. It's all in writing ahead of time, so you know what you're going to do, and hopefully that plan, you know it so well that it's going to be automatic. And in the context of a parole hearing, being automatic means you can talk about it organically. You know yourself, and you know the coping skills that you're going to use. So that is a comprehensive written relapse prevention plan.
Really great. Yeah. Comprehensive, meaning it covers everything. And I think by comprehensive, it's sort of a word for maybe synonymous in this context for separate plans. So if you've got, your crime was committed for the benefit of a street gang, and then you joined prison gangs, and then there was other stuff going on as well. There was violence, domestic violence in your history. Not only, like Joe said, substance use. It's not the only thing that people become addicted to. Anything that your brain utilizes for that, what do you want to call it? Artificial dopamine rush versus getting it through meditation, prayer, or service to others is probably a good reason to make a separate plan. And so comprehensive, on the one hand, probably means separate, like mentioned, and those are sometimes referred to as the risk factors, but also comprehensive, like Joe said, your loved one really needs to think about every possible thing that could be a source of triggering that old reptile brain or the limbic system or whatever gets activated to say the automatic thing it wants to do is say for an alcoholic, for instance. Okay. An alcoholic thinks, whoops. I didn't say that. YouTube, I didn't say that. Darn, I really feel like a drink, as a result of this situation, some commissioner being a jerk or whatever. All the commissioners are never jerkish. They're always super, super, super nice to all. But anyway, just when I'm thinking, I need a drink. Okay, that's that automatic coping strategy that's built into all of us. All of us have it. And so that's why it's really interesting to hear clients say, well, I haven't had a drink and I don't plan to. So that's just not physiologically logical. It doesn't make sense scientifically. Your brain is wired for that. It's always going to be wired for that. What's the coping strategy? The coping strategy is that front part of your brain that hopefully your loved one has been developing over the course of 10, 20 years to develop a skill that says that's able to bring in that coping strategy via the prefrontal cortex. I don't exactly know, or the executive function going, all right, okay, you feel like having a drink to solve this problem. Okay, acknowledged. Compassion for that original strategy, coping strategy that was developed by you based on a core wound. You were wounded. You use that as a coping strategy. It no longer works anymore. And so that sort of thing needs to be really developed in a very comprehensive way, meaning you need to know everything in your life that could pop up that could create havoc if you don't have your, you know, sometimes they call it the loving parent or whatever you want to call it, that steps up and says, no, we're not going to use that old coping strategy today. We're going to use these new coping strategies that we've developed. But you really have to have, your loved one really has to have a really good understanding of himself or herself before making this plan. And that means really understanding causative factors, because the causative factors are the key to understanding the triggers. So your mom and dad, they did certain things to you, and they external things, not your fault, but it created an internal feeling which was normal. But after a while, that feeling was too painful. So you started to paste over it with these negative coping strategies that start out as beliefs and some other things. And then you start to add fuel to the fire. You add substances, you add gangs, you add, environments, whatever it is, lifestyles, habits, and then those start to kind of take over. So it's a very intricate process. And like Joe said, it has to be, I think he used the word organic. We often use the word internalized as well. It's something that even though you're writing it down and it's there for you to kind of tuck in, or your loved one to tuck in his pocket or her pocket as a reminder, so not to become complacent, it really does have to be, like Joe said, something that's automatic, that you go, oh, there it is. I'm angry. Wow. And I really feel like reacting, but I'm not. I know I have some other tools. So what am I going to go to first? For some people, it's a support person, a sponsor. For others, it might be just taking a run, taking a walk. Maybe it's putting on music. Maybe it's processing it through journaling. Again, like Joe said, that too needs to be comprehensive, and it needs to be personalized. It has to be not a one size fits all. Not all the triggers are not the same for gangs, drugs, gambling, in Michael's case, whatever the situation is, whatever the addiction is, whatever was feeding that dopamine hit, those all need to be very personalized, not only to your loved one, his circumstance, but also to his or her risk factors. And they might be different. Michael could walk into probably a bar. I don't know if he could or couldn't. He could probably walk into a bar, no big deal for him. That may not be a trigger, but walks into a casino, that might be something that could get him off the wrong track, because it's just too much of a temptation possibly for him. And maybe in many, many years it wouldn't be, but it's, even if he thought it wasn't, the commissioners are going to be hoping that he thinks of it as not a good situation to be around. And also for Michael, maybe an internal trigger specific to him would be fear of having no money, and then going, what do I do? So that would be an internal trigger specific to Michael, where somebody else might not have that. Say you're a domestic violence commitment offense for domestic violence. You're working, everything's going great, but for whatever reason, your internal trigger is jealousy. So you're not going to get set off for a lack of money issue because you've got plenty of money. You've got some other internal stuff going on. So kind of a lot there as well. But again, for these detailed relapse prevention plans, so important to work the 12 steps with other people, because hearing the experience, strength, and hope of the people that attend that meeting can make you go, oh, that's a trigger for me too. And also sharing, because the commissioners are going to want to have you talking about your relapse prevention plan. You cannot rely on the written copy and go, oh, just look at my plan. Oh, just look at my plan. No, they're really there to test your internalization. So that's all I have. I want to definitely hear from Michael on what he wants to add to the mix here.
Thank you. So as Elizabeth knows, when I went to board my second time, I didn't have just one relapse prevention plan. I had one for gambling, one for my anger, one for my denial, one for my criminal thinking. I addressed the addictive and destructive behaviors that I exhibited even up until the point of my firstborn. And uh, for me, just like take my gambling addiction. One of the first things I did was I did a set of writings, just identifying what the 12 steps meant to me, not, you know, what the book said, but how I apply them to my life, which helped give me some clarity in how I approached my relapse prevention plan. And then, so I started out identifying, and again, none of these clinical or self help terms, but identifying what my addiction was to me and how I developed it. I talked about how it made me feel. I talked about, you know, um, the things in my life that led me down that path, and eventually where it took me when I murdered a man over my gambling addiction. And then after that, I started talking about, okay, these are my triggers. These are my internal triggers. These are my external triggers. Being able to identify our triggers is a big thing. But one thing we have to understand is our triggers change over time. What triggered me a year ago doesn't trigger me now, and something new may trigger me. So it's like I have a new trigger that I experience almost every day. I'm driving down the freeway, and there's these two giant lotto signs that flash the jackpot amounts up there, and, stuck in stop and go traffic, they're in my face like 15, 20 minutes a day. So, I had to develop tools to deal with that trigger. And that's one thing that's, especially going to board, the commissioners want you to understand is that triggers do change, circumstances change. Are you able to adapt? Are you able to develop new tools when you need to and identify the new triggers when they come along? So, for each one of these relapse prevention plans, I identified my triggers at the time, uh, because it's almost impossible to identify a new trigger until it starts occurring. I could go out and say, oh, yeah, well, this might trigger me, that might trigger me. We're talking in theory here. Let's keep it to what we know triggers us for now. All right. And then after that, the next thing I talked about in my relapse prevention plan was when I start experiencing these triggers, how do I feel? So, like with my gambling triggers, I start having these random thoughts, like seeing these signs. I might have a thought, it's like, what can I do with $400 million? Start getting into that fantasy world, thinking about, oh, I can do a lot of good with that money and blah, blah, blah. All right. Well, that already shows me that I'm being triggered for my gambling addiction because I'm thinking about how I could use the money from that gambling win. Of course, at that moment, I'm not seeing that. The odds are 300 million to 1 that I would win. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about, yeah, I could do a lot of good with that. So that little fantasy comes in with my gambling. And then when it starts getting really bad, I start getting fidgety. I could, feel my heart racing, pulsing. It's, when it gets really bad, I start to sweat a little bit and I start getting edgy. And I identified all these things. And again, not using, self-help jargon or all that, just what it does to me, what I feel. And then I got into talking about my tools. And, for my gambling, I have a very long list of tools that I use for my gambling addiction. Uh, Everything from various thought tools to meditation to breathing exercises to, if I can, vacating the area where the trigger's occurring, staying away from people who are actively gambling or talking about gambling. And then things like contacting my support network. And then when we talk about our support network in our relapse prevention, they want to know, who is the support network? If I just put in there, oh yeah, call my support network, they're going to go, okay, so what is that? So, I included members of my family that I talked to about my addiction. I listed my person that was sponsoring me at the time. I've got a new sponsor now that I'm outside in a different group, but I listed the person that was sponsoring me through Gamblers Anonymous at the time out of San Francisco. And, I was on the phone to him several times a week, just checking in. Various accountability partners through within the prison that are familiar with the cycles of addiction, and somebody I could talk to. And then I went a step further, and when I'm on the streets, I have one other very valuable accountability partner in my network, which was my parole agent. And recognizing that is important, because I've had 2 parole agents so far, and I mean, they both just absolutely love me, and their supervisor loves me. But, with both of them, there have been times where, I'm sitting in the car and I'm stuck in traffic, and I would call and say, hey, I'm sitting here staring at this sign and it's really bothering me right now, and I can't get through to anybody else. I just wanted to get this off my chest. And they'll listen. And, my first parole agent, kind of a bear of a man, teddy bear of a man, but a bear of a man. He listened, and he, say a few positive things. And he's like, oh yeah, and by the way, if you gamble, you're going back to prison. So get it out of your head. So, but yeah, identifying all these different things for me helped me outline my relapse prevention plan. And then at the very end of it, I have what I call my action plan. So if I'm feeling triggered, at the first signs of feeling triggered, what do I do? Okay, that's where I'll list maybe some of my breathing exercises or leaving the area. Okay, well, what if it goes to this point? Okay, and then at what point do I make a phone call? So now not only do I have everything identified, now I can go, okay, this is what's going on. These are the steps I need to take. And for me, that relapse prevention formula works. Everybody might have a different formula that they get from whatever, but that works for me. And, I was very happy with it. And apparently the board was very happy with it, because I'm sitting out here now. There were a lot more factors than just relapse prevention plans, but having those are vital. So, that's just kind of my little take on what the relapse prevention plan was for me. So.
That's awesome, Michael. Really awesome. I thought it was funny, but sometimes like the parole agent saying that, I think it's okay. He listened to you, but he also sometimes that is part of a coping strategy, because it's consequential thinking. He's just playing the role of the consequential thinker in that moment. Oh, and just in case you were thinking, just because you gave me a call and you're in a weak moment, that will give you a pass later if you do slip. I just want to let you know, in all fairness, that no, I'm not going to give you a pass. So it's kind of a version of consequential thinking. I think it's can be taken 2 ways. And if you take it negative, and I'm sure you didn't, Michael, because I know you probably took it more on the, hey, you know what? The man it's a loving gesture delivered in the way that his personality is. It's just the way his personality is as a parole agent, and that must work for him or work for his the people that he's in charge with. And I think it's, I had to laugh though, because it's, yeah, what else? That's the last, resort to showing people sometimes, because they get complacent. And you know that too. Complacency is a killer of successful parole. So I think it's a really cute example for sure. I don't have much to add. It's just so important to have these relapse prevention plans written down, but internalized is the most important. And Joseph, it's your book. What do you have to say? We'll give you the final word on the matter.
No, you guys, you both nailed it. You hit the ball out of the park. And internalization is key. Also, as part of parole plans, it's my humble opinion, if you will, that relapse prevention plans are like one of the most important things you can do. Good relapse prevention plans is like one of the best things as part of a parole plan. First of all, excuse me. First of all, I believe relapse prevention plans are to a parole plan just as important, if not more important, than having transitional housing in place. This is your insurance policy for you and for the board to say, hey, I've done all this programming and I've learned these techniques. I've been sober in prison, but of course that's not the same as being sober in society, because you have different triggers or what. But it's saying, this is everything I've learned, and this is how I manage my addiction today. So I've been practicing it. I have it in place. And you're kind of saying in so many words, hey, I've worked on this, so trust me now. But that only comes after you've shown that you've internalized it. So I hope that's not too confusing, but the point is that to have one and to really work it and internalize it, and it's a culmination of programming, your attitude, and everything you've learned.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point to bring up, just to highlight as well and to emphasize, because working your plan, your loved one should be working that plan on the inside. So there's going to be stuff he can or she can use as examples of things that are triggering, and then not just focus so much on the someone bumped me in line in canteen, took my spot, the time was running out, I wasn't going to get my turn or whatever. And that can be translated to a lot of situations on the outside when released on parole, but also not only trying to see those examples and create analogous situations for themselves on the outside, but then also, speaking to people on the outside and go, what kind of stuff triggers you? What kind of stuff bugs you during the day? What kind of stuff gets you going? Especially, that's why it's so important to have a sponsor, and not a plan to have a sponsor, but have a sponsor before you get out, because then you can talk about, I have a client right now, his sponsor, he's got a sex offense actually, and he's got a sponsor, a really great, he really lucked out, and they talk every Wednesday or something. And that person is now helping my client discuss relapse prevention planning for purposes of the board, and saying, what are the real life triggers, not just the parks and the schools and or if you're a substance user, the bars and the liquor stores. Everybody and their dog can name those types of things, but the real life stuff that does happen for all of us, the unexpected. And it's not just the death of a family member, although that is a really big one that can just hit people out of the blue. And, because we can just lose our loved ones out of the blue, and it can really create other issues. Even if the addiction even if you don't solve it by the usual addiction, maybe it creates a new addiction. And so, like what I always say about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's really not about alcohol. It's about the ism and the disease of self and the me, and this the disease of unworthiness. So that comes up in the disease of self-centeredness. Self-centeredness is really the crux of all of this. And taking things personally, probably, and having too many expectations. But anyway, I digress. And so I did want to leave the last word with Joe. So if Michael had something to add, otherwise I'm going to leave it with Joe and then have him let us know what chapter 32 is going to be next week.
Chapter 32. Realistic parole plans. The formulation of realistic parole plans.
Oh, cool. And I was curious, what is the quote that you used for strategy 31?
For relapse prevention?
Yeah, you always have a quote at the beginning of the chapter. I always like that. Mm-hmm.
Sure. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Franklin Roosevelt. Benjamin Franklin.
Love it. Very cool. I don't know how you came up with all these, but anyway, to match them. But really great work. Anything we missed about the chapter, Joe, that you wanted to throw in there? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up and I'll send you guys on your way.
No, I'm so fortunate to be on this panel with you two because you guys always nail it, hit it out of the park with every topic. So,
well, you make it easy. I mean, you've already created the book, so we just kind of bootstrap or whatever you call it, ride your coattails or something like that. And Michael's, and Michael, of course, he's living it every day. He's the one having to not only write it out, but actually live it every day, which is, we're so fortunate to have him participate and actually not flake on us, which is really cool. It's amazing how many of my clients don't want to participate, not because they don't want to give back and serve, but they're terrified of this format thing. It's so interesting. Just a real lack of confidence, which is interesting. But anyway, that's a random nothing going on. So I am going to get to feeding some pigs. What are you guys up to?
Well, I'm going to spend some time with my cousin today. I'm going to spend some time with my cousin and just enjoy my weekend.
Great. And Joe, you're working on your book. Anything fun?
Yeah, I'm just, it's Sunday. I'm going to try to relax, call my brother back in Ohio's, I got to return his call and just enjoy the day and get mentally prepared for the week.
Okay. You got a big week coming up?
It's big enough. Yeah. For some, for eight people who are going to their hearing the week after next. So I'm going to be talking to them.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're going to talk to them about they're getting their 10-day, make sure it's all squared away.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what I do too. I don't like to have any surprises on the day of the hearing.
No. Right.
No. Okay, I'll see you guys next week.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Bye.
Go forth, be good people.
Okay.